While we're waiting, Scott, was that you that said hello?
Yes, I'm here. Good morning, Jan.
Good morning to you. I can hear you loud and clear, just perfect.
Okay, sounds good.
I think Jenny's online. Are you there?
I'm here too. Yep.
Sound great. Let's wait just a couple more minutes and see if board members Marsh and Cannon join us.
I'm here.
Oh, where are you?
I'm probably in the bottom list. Let me look.
You are. I wonder why you're not in the. There you are. Okay. So that's good. Maybe Janet's hiding about somewhere too.
I'll promote him to be a panelist. Hold on just 1 second.
Yeah, you need to be promoted, Mark.
There you go. He's up there now. Hopefully you can see.
Wow.
That's good because then I
The
can
promotion, Jerry.
Goal view or whatever. Yeah,
see the
they
goal.
do. Yeah. But USDB does it in Excel, and I
Let me just shoot Janet a text and make sure she's okay. Oh, Janet just says she doesn't have the link to the meeting. Can Jerry resend? I could probably resend it too.
Yeah, if you want to send it, and I'll send it too, and let's see who can get it first. I'm
Okay.
kidding.
On your mark, get set, go. Hi, Patty. Oh, there's Janet.
I'm here. Thank you for the link.
Yes. Okay. So since we have everyone here, I thought that before we get started, I should wake you up a little bit. And by waking you up, I'm going to show you something strange, which is not unusual. Maybe you're too young to remember, but I'm wondering if you remember these little things called worm on a string. Let me get, oh, okay, where's my camera? Oh, they were little things you'd put on your finger. And like I said, maybe you guys are a little too young. Well, some teachers for Teacher Appreciation Week get things like, gift cards to spas or lotions. I would just like to show you what I got for Teacher Appreciation Week. Try not to be too frightened. It is a giant worm on a string. And the thought occurred to me that, you know what, our agendas have kind of become like this worm on a string. They've been kind of small in the past two times. They just get larger and larger, but I guess we need to think about it in terms of they just get more fun, right? But I wanted to thank committee members, staff members, everyone for all the hard work. I know a lot of time and effort goes into this, and you guys are just awesome at making this work. And I feel so grateful and proud of you. So let's get the work going. And why don't I do a roll call? And as I do a roll call, why don't you go ahead and tell us just what area you represent and anything else. So I'm Jenny Grava, and I am in District 4 and represent areas of Weber District and Davis School District and those areas. So how about Vice Chair Mark?
I am Mark Marsh. I represent District 12. I go Daggett, Uinta, Duchesne, Wasatch, South Summit, North Summit, and a little portion of the outlying school districts.
Is that all?
I tried to squeeze one more in, but I couldn't find one.
Okay, well, I guess you pass. Board Member Earl, how about you?
Yes, Jenny Earl. I represent District 1, and that's Northern Utah. Box Elder, Cache County, a little bit of Weber, Morgan, Rich. Those are the areas that I represent. So, good morning.
Thank you. Good morning. Let's see. Board Member Cannon.
Good morning. Is there a way to turn your video on or off? I can't find it on all of this new stuff. I'm a little confused.
So
It's 8 o'clock in the morning.
Just go to your name and to the right, and you're going to see a little camera, and you just click on it.
My name. I don't even see my name.
I see your name. I can't.
She might have to scroll down.
Scroll down. I've got a big screen with our agenda.
Board Member Shannon. So she just needs to open the participant window first. So
Yeah, I was just going to say, if you go up to the top or wherever you can find your control panel, you want to click on the little 3 people thing and get your panel.
Participants. Ha ha!
You got it.
There you are.
Okay,
Oh, this
let's
is
see your pretty
terrific.
face.
Okay, I don't know if you want to see me at this hour of the morning.
Only if you're in your pajamas. Yay! Okay.
But what you can't see is I have a brush in my hair.
Oh, well, thanks. I appreciate that.
But, so Janet Cannon, I represent District 8, and that is a big chunk of Granite and Murray District.
Okay, thank you, Janet. And then Board Member Hanson.
Scott Hansen, District 2. That's most of Weber County, I guess, or a big part of it. Ogden as well. And that includes Ogden Valley. I'm broadcasting to you live from beautiful Liberty, Utah this morning.
Oh, it looks so beautiful out your window. And then just because we have our secretary, I know she probably doesn't want to be called out, but Nora Lee, are you there? I just want to make sure you're up and running.
I'm here. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning, Nora Lee. Thank you. And then we always have our Dr. Patty Norman with us. Patty, give us a shout out.
good morning, everyone.
Okay, I just have to make sure you're all there. Okay, is everyone ready to go? Thumbs up or yes? Okay. One of the things I wanted to ask before we get started is there is the option of when we vote, you can click the green check for yes and the red X for no. I thought about trying that just and say all those in favor when we get to that, and you could press the green check. All those opposed, you'd press the red X, and then we could, if it wasn't unanimous, we could say. I don't know how you feel about that. When we get to that point, we'll try it the first time, and if you guys like it, we'll stick with it because it might help things go a little more smoothly. If not, we can do a roll call. Okay? Feel free to jump in and give me feedback anytime. Okay, let's start off with action item number 1, which is school counselor to student ratios. We have, I think, Jerry Sagers, the school counseling program specialist, is here to talk to us about this item, give us some background and answer questions. Jerry, you there?
I am. Can you hear me? See me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. So I'm Jerry Sagers, school counseling program specialist. Our 277462-6 school counselor to student ratio requires USBE staff to gather and report information regarding counselor to student ratios for LEAs who have approved school counseling programs and receive funding. The report is completed using data collected from the October 1 count and the FTE licensed in Cactus. Even though the board rule recommends a 1 to 350 ratio, this exceeds the American School Counselor Association's national recommendation of 1 to 250. We bring this to your attention because our long-term goal is to continue to find ways to lower school counselor to student ratio to increase supports for Utah students. In the supporting documents, you will find final board report FY20. This report provides an overview of school to counselor ratio broken down by district, charter, and grades 7 through 12. Currently, school counseling programs are funded through Perkins CTE add-on funding. Therefore, elementary school counselor to student ratio are not included in this report. And just as a side note, in 2020, our elementary to our for K-6 counselor to student ratio is 1 to 1,153. Other items that I want to bring to your attention is that there are 345 secondary schools combining district and charters. 273 schools currently meet the ratio requirements. 72 schools do not meet the 1 to 350 ratio. Our state average for secondary schools is 1 to 327.97. Overall, there are 4 LEAs who did not meet the 1 to 350 ratio and were asked to submit a plan. On a positive note, this is a decrease of 6 LEAs from last school year. The LEAs that have submitted a plan this school year are Davis, Cache, and Iron school districts, as well as American Leadership Academy Charter School. The action item before you is to decide to approve or deny these plans from the 4 LEAs for the upcoming school year, and I'm here to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Jerry. I think that's so encouraging that we've decreased from 10 to 4. That's awesome.
Right. Absolutely.
So board members or committee members, I see that board member Cannon has a question, and then after that we'll do board member Hanson. So Janet.
Thank you. Jerry, that was an excellent report. It was a little like having a fire hose of information coming at me, because when I read this, I read about one of the schools that were working on funding counselors for elementary students. And you mentioned that the current ratio for elementary students with to counselors is like 1 to over 1,000 something.
Correct.
And so I'm just wondering, this 1 to 350 ratio, does that only pertain to secondary students?
Well, of course, we would want 1 to 350 for everyone, all students in the state. But yes, that is what we're counting the ratio for, is 1 to 350 for secondary.
And as I recall, maybe see if I'm correct in this, that we oftentimes would petition the legislature for funding to do this, and the legislature finally just said, we're tired of hearing, this is my perception. They said, we're tired of hearing from you. We're just going to make the law that is the ratio, and you guys find a way to do it. And so how much of the federal Perkins funding has made this possible, and how much have individual districts had to go through and try to commit money to this? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yes, CTE is a base funding, and they get $20,000 per school is all, with some WPU for which is 400 to 1,200 students. But the schools and the districts have to come up with the rest of the money for that. So it's, but we do have money coming in through our mental health grant, which we've been able to hire more counselors that way. But yeah, there's a lot. The CTE funding, it funds programs, not people, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Janet. Thank you, Jerry. Scott Hanson.
Thank you. Good morning. I was just wondering, and thank you for the report, and it is encouraging. We're headed in the right direction.
Right.
I wondered, with regard to these plans, what our expectations are. There's a big variance, it looked like, in what the schools have submitted to. We have some kind of expectation that this be, a concrete plan that's measurable, or are there any criteria that we should be using to review these plans?
And I'm sorry, you broke up. And could you repeat what you are asking me?
The question is, do we have any criteria for the plans that are submitted that we should use in evaluating them? Because it looks like there's a big difference in what came in from the different districts. Is there any criteria that USB has used in the past?
And I'm sorry, but I don't know about plans in the past or if there's criteria. I just know that we ask you to look over it. There is a variance in what the districts are submit for their plans. So as far as criteria for you as board members, I don't know of any criteria. And Kim Herrera is on for any historical information. If she knows anything about criteria for plans, I would be more than happy to have her jump in.
I saw Patty had her hand up, but then she took it down. So I wonder if Kim or Patty, you would like to comment on that?
Yeah, I was going to ask for Kim to comment on that.
Okay, Kim, would you be willing to comment on that?
Hi, this is Kim Herrera, from County Program Specialist. I'm referring to Global 277-462-6, an online, sorry, let me pull up the item. Line 5, all the criteria outlined in rule understand it. Says one for submitting the LEA certified ratio, an LEA that has not required ratio in section 1 shall select a plan outlining a reasonable timeline and method for achieving compliance.
I don't know if others were having trouble. Kim, I had a little hard time hearing you. Were others? Is there anyone who could restate that so we could hear that a little more clearly?
Jeff Van Holten, I was reading R277462-6, line 5.
Thank you. Scott, were you able to get what you needed out of that? I don't know if you had trouble hearing.
I'm sorry, Chair. There's a big echo. It's like she's double. So I didn't understand what was. Maybe
There's some echoing going on, so I don't know where that affects that. But from what I can understand, it sounds like there is some criteria. Jeff has pulled up the rule. Jeffrey Van Holten has pulled up the rule for you guys to look at. Okay. So line 5, no later than June 1st from submitting the LEA's certified ratio, an LEA that does not meet the required ratio in subsection 1 shall submit to the board a plan outlining a reasonable timeline and a method for compliance. So is the criteria, a timeline and a method to achieve compliance. Is that correct?
I would say yes.
Okay. Scott, do you some more detail with that?
No, that helps. Some criteria to look at. My next question would be, we look at what's been submitted. How do we feel, or how is staff done in meeting those criteria?
So, Scott, your breakup as well for me, there was a little bit of an echo. I think you said you see plans that had in the past. Is that correct?
No, I'm talking about the plans that have been submitted. How the staff they've done meeting those criteria.
Would you be willing to type what you're asking in the box? Just because I think some of us are having a really hard time hearing. And if anybody else who's on could mute, that would be helpful. So let's have everybody mute, and then Scott, will you try that one more time?
Okay, I'm on. Can you hear me?
Yes.
So my question is, how does staff feel submitted with regard to criteria? Does it LEAs have reasonable timing, a method?
Jerry, are you able to answer that? And again, just a reminder, your microphone is not muted. Mute that, please.
I'm sorry. I think he was asking if they have submitted a timeline with their report. I can say that ALA, it had a plan for having an intern and that they would be in ratio by next year. Cash had a lot of growth and they've changed some boundaries and they feel like that's going to come more into compliance by next year. Davis is focusing on K-12 hiring and they've hired more elementaries and feel like as they hire their elementary school counselors, then they'll be able to focus more on secondary and get that into compliance. And Iron is hiring LCSWs and their plan is to be in compliance by 2025. I hope that answers his questions. I just really couldn't hear him well enough.
Okay, that answered it for me. I'm wondering if Scott, did that give you what you needed?
I appreciate that. Thank you. I didn't see in the Davis County report a date that they would come into compliance, and I didn't see in the Iron County report the method that they were going to use to come into compliance spelled out clearly. So I was wondering if staff saw that differently. But based on what I saw, I would ask for those two to be revamped and sent back to us. Let me know if I'm off base, I guess is the question now.
Jerry, could you comment on that? Would you be willing?
I agree with him. Although I did, when we talked earlier on how if they're trying to support students, we hate to punish them for, I agree that Davis did not put in when they would be in compliance, but that they were working on it. And also that Iron has a plan to do it, but that they are focusing their energy on LCSWs instead of counselors. So we hate to punish them or make it so that we hurt their ability to not have supports in the schools. So yes, I'm fine with if the board wants to go back with, of course, we support what the board decides on these plans.
Jerry, what are the repercussions if we do not approve the plans? Like what happens?
So that would be up to the board. We could withhold funding. I mean, that could be decided, or they could be put on a tiered approach where a percentage would be withheld. That's up to the board to decide. Those are just some options.
Chair, is there an option just to have them resubmit?
Jerry, is that an option for them just to resubmit?
As far as I know, it's an option. Maybe I want Kim to weigh in on this, where this to see if that has been in history.
Kim, could you comment on that, please?
Yes, this is Kim Herrera. We would be more than happy to ask those districts to resubmit and clarify that the expectation needs to have a clear set date as well as a clear set plan, and we could have that to you by June.
Okay, and then let me just check. I see quite a few hands up. I see Janet's, Jenny's, and Scott's. If your hand means to be up, keep it up. Okay, Jenny Earl, you had a question?
Yeah, so I have a couple of questions. So this particular ratio is dependent, they get funding for it, right? I mean, this plan is based on funding. So I think there does need to be clearly outlined, especially where it includes that in the law. The other thing is that it seems like most of these are fine. There's just a couple of components that need to be added to the others. I'm not sure it needs to come back to standards and assessment if they can provide that information by the next board meeting. There isn't a reason to delay it several months and put it out clear till August. We might as well, right? I suppose in a motion we could ask that those deficiencies be corrected before the board meeting. I'm just saying so that we don't have to delay another month on that. So
great point. Janet, did you have a question?
I was going to chime in and just say, I thought I read Davis's plan, and I thought their attempts to add full-time counselors in elementaries in 3 years sort of gave them a pass for me. But I thought Iron County's plan was not up to snuff when compared to the others. They say they hope they can do it. They're exploring ways to add things. They are looking at adding school psychologists. They're trying. I mean, these are all hopeful words, but there's nothing specific. And so that was the plan. I agree with Scott that I think maybe Iron County at least needs to come up with more of a plan to work on getting to where they need to be. Plus, they're the ones that are more out of compliance than any of the others.
Vice Chair Marsh.
Thank you, Chair. I'm in agreement with everyone else. I think that we need to have a definite goal of how and when they can make this happen so that we can go rather than just kind of kicking the can down the road. I understand that a lot of times for small school districts, it's tough, like Iron County. Some of their schools that may not be meeting that or have the ability to do it might be funding because it's small. So I don't think that the pulling funding away from school districts is going to be the way to punish them, because that's asking, we need you to buy this item, but we're going to pull all the money away from you to do it. I think we've got to work with them like the other committee members have suggested. Just ask them to please give us a definite date, a definite plan, so that we can make sure that they have something to work towards. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, I like the idea of
pulling funding away from school districts,
supporting these, but
because that's asking.
Oh, Mark, are you still going?
Item. We're going to pull all the money away from you to do it. I'm not. I don't know where you're getting that from.
Oh, okay. I thought I heard somebody talking. Okay.
It was my voice, but I don't know why I'm echoing that late. I'm a late person.
You had a very long echo. Okay. Anyway, I just think that I like the idea of Board Member Earl's comment where, maybe we pass these, but, we just make sure they add dates, they add some things because, if we're looking at true local control where a district like Iron, maybe their best approach is more licensed clinical social workers. Just a thought there. So Committee Member Earl, you had a comment or question?
sorry, I didn't take my hand down. I apologize.
Jeffrey Van Holten.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I just wanted to point out to everyone, I don't know if this really helps the conversation too much, but down here on line 6 and 7, or subsection 6 and 7 in the rule on the screen, you'll see that if they don't fulfill their plan, then you can put them on a corrective action plan in pursuant to Rule 114. So it's a slightly separate conversation in that we're looking at, did you actually fulfill the plan, which to me reads to include, did you actually accomplish getting to the ratio, because that's what the plan is supposed to tell us how you will do that. So I don't know if that adds comfort to anyone. I do recognize that there's nothing in this rule that talks about the quality of the plan and whether the plan comes out as some feedback.
Okay.
I think you're unmuted again. Thank you, Patty. She has a powerful microphone on her computer. So question whether or not that answers the concern, but you would have to wait until they fail on the plan. It's not a very proactive approach, it's more reactive. But you do have method for achieving compliance needs to be in the plan. So I think that's where you might be able to hang your hat a little bit. But it's also one thing to consider for this committee is if you'd want to bring this rule in and make some specifics about what a plan needs to include, but I would defer to staff on whether or not they want to go that far and have some backing of rule on what needs to be in a plan. But for now, that's not really in there. So that's 5, 6, and 7 is where you'd have to hang your hat. I don't know if I've helped anyone, but
yeah, thank you, Jeff. I think we have Kim Herrera and Superintendent Dixon would like to comment on that.
Thank you. This is Kim Herrera. I also want to bring your attention to Iron School District. Their plan does not address what board rule is asking for. To meet compliance for ratios with R277462, they do have to hire licensed school counselors. So even though they are looking at additional ways to support the students, which we always want to provide that flexibility on personnel, their funding source that they are getting for school counseling programs does require them to come up with a plan to hire school counselors to meet their ratio. So I just wanted to bring that to your attention.
Great, thank you, Kim. Superintendent Dixon?
Yeah, and my comment was also with iron. Kim's right. Historically, I mean, you guys know that I've been around a long time, and I'm a former school counselor, and we have been working on this with accreditation, our comp guidance money, really trying to get the ratios right. But I do want to echo what Mr. Board Member Marsh said, in that with rural districts, they're also doing some really creative and supportive things. In the case of iron, I would say that they've probably got the best advisory methodology that I've seen in terms of having kids individually work with students during a particular time of the day. And it really is a model. So I just want to say that they need to keep working towards the ratio that Kim just talked about, while at the same time, I don't want the public to think the kids aren't being served, because I would really hold iron up as a model for the way that they support kiddos individually through advisory as well.
Thank you for that. Thank you both for adding those comments. Board Member Hanson, question? If you're muted, Scott.
There we go. Ready to make a motion, Chair, if we're at that point. I would move that we accept the applications of ALA and cash, and that we request that Davis and Iron resubmit their plans to be compliant with the rule, and that would come back to committee before going to the board.
Okay.
Speak to that.
Okay, let me make sure. Let me just restate the motion. So the motion before the committee is to accept the plans for ALA and cash and request that Davis and Iron resubmit to be compliant with the rule and have that come back to committee. Do you want to speak to that motion?
If I could. Davis is mostly timing. Their plan states that they're looking at this and need some leniency over the next couple of years. I think they can tie that down fairly easily. I think Iron, we've talked about the deficiencies there that need to be corrected. I'd like to see it come back to committee this first time so that we could get a good sense for, what is a reasonable time frame and what's a reasonable plan before we pass that on to the board. Unless there are time constraints that are going to, that's going to cause problems. So I'd like staff to chime in on that part of it.
Okay, so let's do discussion of that motion. And since you've asked staff, is there staff that would like to comment on time constraints or anything that Scott was asking?
The only thing I can see that might be a problem in getting it is just the situation that we're in right now with COVID-19. But for us to go back to the districts and have them rewrite with a timeline and a plan of how they're going to achieve that, I don't think that that's a problem.
Okay, thank you. Does anyone else want to speak to that motion? I see a few hands up. I just want to have you double check your hands if they're not supposed to be up. If you'll take them down, if they are supposed to be up, then I'm going to call on you. Kim, did you want to speak again?
Yes, I just wanted to let you know that we would still be in compliance with board rule if we held it one more month for board meeting or for committee meeting. In the rule, it does say that they just have to have their plan submitted by June 1. So if we waited one more month to have them resubmit, we would still be in compliance.
Okay, excellent. Thank you for that feedback. Is there any other discussion to that motion? Okay, seeing none, let me restate the motion. The motion is that the committee recommend that we accept the school counseling funding plans for ALA and Cash District, but we request that Davis and Iron resubmit by June 1 to be compliant with the rule. So all those in favor of that, click your green check mark. Are there any opposed?
Hey, Jenny, where are you finding your check marks?
Okay,
I'm
so
working off
are you on a phone, Mark?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Is it in the polling area on the?
So I'm not sure what it looks like on the phone. If somebody else wants to chime in, it may not be it's the same place as you were able to raise your hand.
Yeah, let's go back there and look.
Okay, and if this doesn't work, if we don't like it this way, I thought it would be maybe move it along better, but if it's, oh, you got your hand raised.
Yep, I've got nothing but chat and lower hand and raise hand.
You know what? For you, we can say hand raise. So the motion carries unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you. Nora Lee, were you able to get that okay?
Yes, I was. Sorry, I was trying to find where my mute button was.
You're fine. It's hard to find. Okay. Committee members, either just give me a thumbs up. Are you okay with doing the check marks, or would you prefer to have a voice vote? Janet's checking.
I think this is Jenny Earl. I think it's fine. It really probably doesn't take any more time to do the voice vote with 5 people.
Okay.
I'm just saying in general, not that it matters, but
No,
yeah.
I appreciate that feedback. Well, then why don't we just do that? Okay. All right, everyone, let's move on to action item number 2, which is R277-004, requirements for assessments of student achievement. This is an amendment. We had to add some things about a third proctor, and I believe Jared Wright's going to be speaking to this for us.
Chair, if I may, can I begin the introduction?
Of course, Jeffrey Van Holten, you can always.
You're kind to me. Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to highlight the changes as you mentioned, and then pass it over to Jared Wright. I think we'll kind of co-present this agenda item along with the next one with the testing ethics document. So every year, this rule 404 with the assessment, it incorporates by reference, scroll down to that area, the standard test administration and testing ethics policy. And you'll notice that we have a version of 2019. We update this every year, this document, which means we have to update the rule every year because it is technically part of the rule via the incorporation. So you'll see that change, and Jared will speak to some of the changes that are going on with the ethics policy document. But I can also just highlight the rest of the edits are really more technical. You'll notice some of our testing entities have changed their names to just be their acronym, or they don't exist at all anymore. So we kind of updated that. We also, due to House Bill 114, we now have the early mathematics assessment the benchmark assessment. So you'll notice we changed the definition to just be a benchmark assessment, and we added in the mathematics to be compliant with the new law. And as Chair Gravitt mentioned, throughout the rule, we are now requiring that a third-party proctor be subject to all of the same training and standards of ethics that an education administrator of a test would have to live up to. So you'll just notice that third-party proctor language. I did want to highlight what looks like a big deletion toward the end of the rule. Down here on lines 230 to 239. Those elements are being moved into the policy document that's incorporated by reference. Jared had pointed out that it made more sense for these to be in that document than in the rule. So that's why you see that deletion. So these requirements still exist. I want to make sure we're on the record pointing out these are still requirements. We're just moving where you read them. So, but with that, that's the rule. And I can, if there are no questions, we could pass it over to Jared to talk about the document itself and what is being updated.
Okay, thank you, Jeff. Let me see if we have any questions from committee members. Seeing none. Jared, do you want, oh, I do see one. Board Member Earl, go ahead.
Yes, my only question is maybe the difference between the idea of a performance on a statewide assessment versus a required assessment, or a state required assessment versus statewide. I'm just, is it just, we like that term better? I just didn't know if there was something more to that.
Sure.
Weaved throughout our whole document.
So we refer to statewide in statute and in all of our other documents, but and somewhat throughout this rule, but the older language of the state required was still in there. So we just went through and cleaned that up.
Janet?
Thank you. I have sort of an associated question. It regards line 147, where it says that you can't bar students from signing up for AP classes, IB classes, and etc. I just wonder, because I know my kids went to Olympus High, and there were, for every class, there were multiple barriers to a student getting into that class. You know, you had to have such and such grades in junior high, or you couldn't stand up for this class. And I just wondering, how well is that working? And do we have any feedback on whether these classes are now really open to all students, and even anecdotal information?
Sure, I can start with an answer to that, but I think there's some staff online that would probably be best if they want to raise their hand, if they feel like they're equipped to answer it. But we will be in June. We're going to be in the committee hearing updating all of the concurrent enrollment, AP and IB course related rules. So there will be a deeper conversation in June about that, and some of these same elements and language are going to be in that rule, or those two rules as well. To try and eliminate those barriers. But as to how that's actually looking and if the results are actually being achieved, I'll have to defer to staff on that.
And I just want to speak anecdotally. As a ninth grade teacher, we have kind of a formula to help know if kids will be successful in honors. We never bar them, but we do look at factors and then have a discussion. But again, if a student wants to self-choose to get in there, I think most teachers are willing to let them in, but they also want them to be successful, and so may use that as a way to gauge the ability to be successful, just from a personal experience. Any other staff want to comment on that? Oh, Jared, go ahead. Jared,
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, now I can hear you. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, I've got like a bunch of mute buttons.
Yeah.
So just anecdotally as well, we have been contacted multiple times in the past years from either parents or from, actually it's mostly parents who are wondering about things, and we work with the assessment director to make sure it's clear, and then we also find out from the assessment director what their perspective is. This happened with Washington School District in the past and working with them. So it has happened, and we work as we hear about it. We also, with the next agenda item, with the testing ethics policy, we have an additional training document that we provide to LEAs if they want to use, but they're also required to provide training. So we work with them when we find out things that need to be clarified.
Thank you for that. Do we have any other questions from committee members for Jared or Jeff? Okay, seeing none, I am looking for a motion to approve R277404, if somebody would be willing to do that. Janet, thank you.
I will make a motion that we approve R277-404 draft. Which draft is it? One?
Draft one.
Draft one on first reading and forwarded it to the board for approval on second and final reading.
Okay, thank you. The motion before the committee is that we approve R277-404 draft one on first reading and forward to the board for approval on second and final reading. Is there any discussion to that motion? Okay, seeing none, let's take a voice vote. Board Member Marsh.
Aye.
Board Member Cannon.
Aye.
Board Member Earl.
Aye.
Board Member Hanson.
Aye.
Oh, it's so nice to hear your voices. Okay, I'm an aye. Motion carries unanimously. Okay, good job, you guys. Let's go ahead and move to a very related one. Action item number 3, which is the 2020-2021 Standard Test Administration and Testing Ethics Policy. I don't know if Jeff or Jared or Darren's going to start this one. I would know this wouldn't be Jeff. Darren or Jared's going to start this one out, but whoever it is, go ahead and talk to us.
Hi, this is Jared again.
Okay, Jared.
Before, just to share who I am, I work in the assessment and accountability section as the test administration and data coordinator.
Thank you.
So in tandem with the prior agenda item, the testing ethics policy is included within the board rule, and then we just have it here as with more details. This policy is referenced and should be followed by LEAs and schools in the administration of assessments, and also, we also include training, a training PowerPoint. We also include a signature form on our website as resources for LEAs, so they can create their own. They just need to provide training around the policy. My plan is to just walk through some of the changes that we've had, and if that's okay, I'll go that way. Similar to board rule, we've made the change to statewide. And one comment to Board Member Earl's question, some of the formative tools that we have aren't necessarily required, they're optional. And so I think statewide, a feeling is that it covers more of those assessment tools that we provide rather than state required. Then under, I'll just walk through the document, just highlighting a few. Under the purpose of testing section, we've just clarified and simplified a little bit to reduce some of the language that didn't need to be there. We also added a new section underneath assessments called Formative Assessment Tools. We wanted to clarify or at least give some guidance around some of the tools that we have that are more classroom-based, and they're referenced here. We have some RISE benchmark modules and high school benchmarks and Acadia reading progress monitoring. So we wanted to clarify some of that, and that some of the requirements around test security for teachers might be reduced and to reference the test administration manuals. Also, it's down in the during testing section, we just clarified, added a bit more detail in there. And then, as Jeffrey mentioned, with the board rule, we also inserted third-party proctors to be part of that. They need to complete the testing ethics training. And then going through, let's see, I'm just trying to pull out. So one of the other larger changes that we made here, this past year we had some students use smartwatches to be able to access content that they shouldn't be accessing during testing. So we included some examples around electronic devices. We also included a line about electronic devices if they're used for student safety or health, that those should still be accessible or provided to students when that need arises, just to make sure that student's being taken care of during testing. And then we also, in the after testing, there's some changes with language, just simplifying again and removing some language that was a bit redundant. We also included the may not provide a non-academic reward phrase from board rule 277404, just because we wanted to, in this case, be a little redundant and make sure that that's being taken care of. Oh, thank you for pulling it up. So we're on page 3. Perfect. Actually, if you want to scroll down just a little bit more, just, yeah, there, provide a non-academic reward. In the unethical testing practices section, that's where, as Jeffrey mentioned, we removed 4, I guess, bullet points from the board rule, and they fit better here. And so we've included them under the unethical testing practices, and you'll see those in green that they've been changed or included here, excuse me. And that really is it. Any questions? Or so I guess that's it. And as mentioned with board rule, we're seeking approval for this for the 2020 and 2021 school year to be able to be used by LEAs and schools.
Okay. Thank you, Jared. Do we have any questions? It looks like we have Board Member Earl. Go ahead first, and then Board Member Cannon, and then Board Member Hanson.
Yes, my question had to do with if a teacher did use an assessment to improve a student's academic grade. I was just trying to find the law real quick. I think it specifically spells out that if a parent requests, then a teacher may use that to enhance their grade. So I don't know, maybe someone could direct me to where that actual language is. I was just trying to look it up. I clicked on this, but I'm not sure. Anyways, I'll keep searching for that. Maybe see if we can make sure we verify the exact content there.
I don't know if somebody wants to comment on that. I believe that would be in House Bill 81. Can't remember. But let's go to Janet.
Thank you. I have a question for Jared. I noted that they included formative assessments in here, and I'm wondering if there's any differentiation between the policies and procedures that are incorporated in providing formative assessments versus summative assessments. You would comment on that, please.
Sure. Here, let me get my camera. So there are some procedures. I'll use RISE benchmark modules as an example. So the purpose of this assessment is for a teacher to use within their classroom. So the teacher has visibility into what test questions are going to be provided on that particular benchmark. They can see it and they can actually preview it prior to giving the test. They can give the test then to their students. And then what they can do is go back into the reporting system, and we allow the teacher to then display it within the classroom to talk with students about their responses. Obviously, with not sharing student names, but be able to allow them to use that as a more instructional tool happening frequently throughout the year. So there are some differences around the administration and the security of the items. And so in the document, we've tried to include those differences within each tool's test administration guide or manual. So within the RISE test administration manual, there is a formative assessment section or benchmark module section that will allow them to follow those guidelines rather than the summative version. And we just wanted to call that out within this document.
Yeah, as a
Does
teacher,
that help?
that's really helpful. Let's see, I think Scott Hansen, you had a question?
Thank you. As I was reading through this, when I looked, and maybe whoever's got control of the screen can help me, looking at the purpose of testing section. I wondered here if it might be more easily understood if we just said that teachers under Utah Code 53E4301.5 with information to, and then just include all the items in a bulleted list, because I think we've broken it into two categories for some reason, and it doesn't seem like we need to do that. That's more of a technical edit. I think the content's all there, but I don't know why there's two tiers of information there. As I went down on assessments, is that statewide assessments where we reference assessments? Or is that all assessments? It looked like we were just referencing statewide assessments, and I wondered if that should be the heading. And then below, one more, where we get to before testing, down a little bit further. It looked to me like if we read down to during testing, Utah LEAs ensure that, and it says students are enrolled in appropriate courses, curriculum and instruction in courses is aligned with Utah core standards. I believe that really should be up under an LEA section for before testing, because that's not something that's happening during the test. The students prior to testing need to be enrolled in appropriate courses, and curriculum and instruction is something that would happen before testing. So I wondered if we might need a section for before testing for the LEAs and then one for the teachers like we have down below. and if some of those items on during testing would fit better into a before testing category. So I'm happy to shut off my mic and listen to comments from staff on those three.
Yes, is there staff that would comment on those concerns and observations by Board Member Hanson?
Hi. So let's see, there were a few there, so I'll see if I can hit them all. For the ones under the purpose of testing, if we could scroll back up to that. Really, I'm not sure why we have them divided into two bits of information with you have the two bullets and then you have information too. So I'm, I don't see any reason why not to include it, and anything that will clarify would definitely be beneficial. For the assessment section, you're correct, Board Member Hanson. That is referencing a statewide assessments that we've been talking about, not all not all assessments. But I think that's what we're with statewide. We're trying to get that any state provided assessments fit under there. So perfectly, again, if that would help clarify. And then going down to during testing, I think that's a good point, especially with the curriculum and instruction. One thing, I guess it depends what that fine line between is it before or during, because so I think what we're saying here for the first bullet point under during testing is make sure students are in the right courses to be able to be rostered to take the appropriate test. And maybe we need to clarify that. But it's true, they should be enrolled in the appropriate course throughout the year and not just plugged into something just before testing or right as they're beginning. So I think for me, those are clear points.
Board Member Hanson, did that answer the questions that you had? Did it give you clarification?
Yes, I appreciate that, and I'm ready to make a motion then if we're at that point, Chair.
We have one more. I want to make sure, Board Member Earl, did you have something to say before the motion?
Sorry, I'm unmuted, muted, then unmuted again, so I apologize.
We understand.
My question still, once again, has to do with I'd like to know where the specific language is that links us to what use a student score from a statewide assessment to improve a student's academic grade for a demonstrated. For some reason, I still think that that's a parent asking for that. But if someone could help me find that, I'm having trouble locating that specific language.
So I wonder if Darren Nielsen could chime in. If you look in the chat box, it's in House Bill 118, line 60, but
that just passed this year. That's it was from last year, the changes to that. So it should have been updated in our law.
Yeah, let's have Darren comment on that. And it's on the screen now, if you look at the chat.
Oh, sorry. Okay, let me get to the
it's on the screen now. Yeah, sorry.
Darren Nielsen, Assistant Superintendent of Student Learning for the Utah State Board of Education. I'm happy to jump in and try to address the question that Board Member Earl has. I put the links, the passage of the bill, I believe you're right, that was 2 years ago that passed, and then they've updated the language in each specific required assessment or statewide assessment. And I put the links to those three, the RISE, or what in statute is called the Utah Standards Assessment, the high school assessment, which our students would recognize as the Utah Spire Plus, and then the college readiness assessment. So when they passed that bill, it changed the language of those three subsequent bills specifically. And the language in there as a teacher, we just took it directly out of that bill. So I'm reading off of the link that's college readiness assessment. A teacher may use a student score on the college readiness assessment to improve a student's academic grade or demonstrate the student's competency within a relevant course. So I think as it went through the legislative process and the give and take that goes there, I think what you'll see is that a teacher can only use it if it improves the student's grade. So it doesn't require the parent, obviously the parent's involved, because to participate in the test itself, the parent is involved in authorizing or approving that practice for their child. But once they've done that, if the outcomes of that assessment, the teacher decides to try to use that or allow a student to use that to demonstrate understanding and competency towards the core standards associated with that course, then they can use it, but only if it improves the student's grade.
Board Member Earl, does that clarify things for you?
Yeah, I just couldn't, I was looking in 2 or 3 sections. It took me a minute to find it. So I just want to make sure it lined up. So thank you. I appreciate that. And sorry, I don't know. So maybe someone could help me. I'm not sure how to, I can do people's pictures really good on the screen, but I'm not, for some reason, I'm not figuring out how to access when you pull something up. Occasionally I can do it. So I'm not sure why I can do it sometimes and why I can't do it other times. So maybe, I don't know. I'll keep fiddling around with it. So I was trying to locate both. So I do apologize. Okay.
It's hard. Let's go back to Scott. You said you were ready to make a motion. Scott, if you are talking, you are muted. I don't know if you are.
Am I off now?
Yeah, you're on now. Perfect.
Sorry, I've got a real lag here as to what happens. I think my internet's not so good. I move that we accept the standard test administration and testing ethics policy dated June 4th, 2020, with the revisions to purpose of testing, statewide assessments, and the before testing and during testing sections that have been discussed in this meeting, and that we pass that on to the board for approval.
Okay, let me make sure I got that okay and you correct me. So the motion before the committee is that we approve the 2020-2021 Standard Test Administrative and Testing Ethics Policy dated June 4th, 2020 with revisions to the purpose, statewide assessment, and the during and after sections. I think I might have missed that last part.
Before and during sections.
Before and during sections as revised or as discussed.
Yeah.
Okay. Any discussion to that motion?
I just have another question.
Okay, go ahead, Jenny.
And it could be in regards to the motion, just with, I understand we're including third-party proctors in here and such. I don't know, maybe I'm thinking this out in my mind. I guess this is relevant to state assessments, administered assessments. The only reason why I was saying that is because I've had children that have had tests they've taken at home, but they're not stated. Okay, sorry, I'm actually thinking this out in my mind, trying to figure out that balance in this new element we're in and making sure it aligns with what we're passing. So, okay, sorry, I had to speak it out in order to get the thought through. So I apologize. Thanks
No,
for
I actually think it's good to talk it through out loud because I think a lot of us have the same dialogue going on. So you just put words to it.
Okay.
Any other discussion to the motion? Okay, Norley, I'm going to restate it. If it's not clear, speak up and tell me to try again. So the motion before the committee is that we approve the 2020-2021 Standard Test Administration and Testing Ethics Policy dated June 4th, 2020, with revisions to the purpose, statewide assessment, and the before and during sections as discussed.
Got it.
Oh, you're awesome. Thank you. Okay, let's do a roll call vote. Vice Chair Marsh.
Aye.
Board Member Cannon.
Aye.
Board Member Earl.
Aye.
Board Member Hanson.
Aye.
And I'm an aye as well. So that motion carries unanimously. Jared, thank you so much. Thank you, committee. Let's move on to agenda item number 4.
This is Jerry. If you can hear me, just say yes in the chat box.
Oh, is everyone still there?
I'm here.
So I don't know what just happened. My computer just shut off and I'm back. I don't know if I need to move to a different computer or if we are good.
I've got you here.
Okay, I'm sorry. I don't know what happened. It just like it said, no more. I'm going to stop you. Okay, so we are on action item number 4, R277497, the school accountability system. This is an amendment and a continuation. It looks like we just needed to change some reporting dates. I believe Jeffrey Van Holten is going to talk to us about this one. So,
Thank you, Chair. This one, it was originally coming before you as just a continuation, and then staff was able to identify a couple of dates that needed to be amended. So you'll notice here on line 43, we deleted the reference to the 17-18 school years. We have passed that by a couple of years. You will notice I have here in blue for a draft as amended when the motion is made. We decided we wanted to add in the language from Senate Bill 119, make sure it was very clear that these are the next 2 years that the legislature has exempted the board from having to provide a school grade if they so choose. So we've added that in. And the only other amendment is down on line 90 and 91, where we just take out a requirement to have something posted on our website by July 1. So we just wanted to make sure that we don't currently do this anymore. We do it in a different method through giving a memo to the LEAs. So we just wanted to update the rule to align with current practice. And just making sure I'm seeing some chat that there's a typo. Yep, 1818. Definitely would like that to be 19. Thank you, Whitney. That's it. So continuation in those 2 amendments.
okay, Board Member Hanson, you have a question for Jeff?
Just a quick one. So I understand that we're using a memo now, that notification. Is there a date that memo needs to go out by? Should we have some date still in there, even though the method is different?
I will defer to Darren on that one. If I can phone a friend.
Darren, you've been called.
Hey, I'm happy to join in. I don't know that I can add much to this. As I look at this, the specific question, whether we actually need a date in there or not, we do ask, because of publication, the complexity of taking it from an LEA posting it onto a USB website, there's obviously a deadline at some point where we ask them to finalize their information. Over the first year that we had the self-reported indicators available, and we were in the development phase, that date was moved continually throughout the year to be able to accommodate some delays in the system development, and also once we published the date to the LEAs through an email communication through our assessment directors, we had LEAs that requested additional time, which we granted to them because, again, we're in the new phases. It was a new operation. If you don't include the date in the rule, which is what we're, I guess, advocating for, there'll still be a date, but it gives staff flexibility to work around the other parameters to be able to accommodate LEA requests. So I would make the request that you allow the staff, USB staff, to make a determination each year on when that date would be. But you're right, Board Member Hanson. There's a date that we publish. Again, obviously this year that date's not applicable anymore, and we're requesting just the ability for staff to select that date and notify the LEAs rather than have it in the board rule.
Scott, did you have a follow-up with Darren on that, or is that good?
No, I appreciate the explanation. I think that's fine as long as there's some date that's established each year. If it needs to be different each year, then we should give them that flexibility.
Great. Board Member Cannon, question?
Thank you. I actually have 3 questions. May I ask them one at a time?
You sure can.
I can't hear you. There you are. Okay. First question is, if we have an elementary school that is given a rating of A, it has 6.5%. And I'm just wondering, what does that number mean? Does it mean that all the kids in the school were tested and their average score was that number higher, or what exactly does that mean?
Okay, let's start with that question. Darren, you want to respond to that one?
I'm muting and unmuting again, like some other folks have had. I apologize.
It's a battle.
Yeah, remember, Cannon, that's a challenging question to answer in just a few sentences. I guess the best way to talk about it is within the accountability system, schools, and maybe to a smaller degree, students generate points for their school report card. And that can be calculated. They have an opportunity to earn points on the achievement indicator, which points to your question that if I'm a student and I reach a proficiency level on my language arts test, for instance, then I generate a portion of the points that go to my overall school. I also am going to get, there's also an opportunity for me as a student to generate points on my growth. The growth is tied directly to the achievement level on my test, but there's points generated by how much progress I make in comparison to my like peers from the previous year. And it's more complicated than that, but generally speaking, growth. The school also gets points for their English language learners' progress. And then in addition, at an elementary level, we look at the students who are in the lowest 25% of the achievement level for their school, and you can generate additional points towards that A grade that you referenced, or the percentage of the points based on how the lowest 25% of the students in that school are performing in regards to growth. We get to the high school, it gets more complex. There's more variables or more indicators. Those all are displayed on the school report card. But that's a general description of how the points, when you reference in this policy so many percents of the points, that's how it's calculated, generally speaking. And we have the details of that in our accountability technical manual that we publish and make available to the public as well.
Janet, does that help?
I don't think it would do me to try to read the technical manual, but I appreciate that explanation. So it's not straightforward, apparently. We're not just looking at something simple there when we see those numbers. The the second question, I imagine, follows the first in technicality, which is why do we have a difference of 0.75 between elementary schools that have an A and high schools that have an A? So all of those numbers are similar for school grading cutoffs, but they're slightly different between elementary and high. Is there a simple answer to that, Darren?
Darren, you have 10 words. Just kidding.
No, I wish there was a simple answer. There is, but it's always followed with a lot of technicality. The previous statute around our accountability system used to have a norm referenced flavor to it, and so it required that only so many schools could get an A, so many schools could get a B, and so forth. Kind of a bell curve system. As you can imagine, that was very unpopular. Not that school grades are popular in any context, but in general, it was really unpopular with the field, especially when you would have a school one year get a grade of, well, let's say a B. The next year, because of the norm reference nature, they scored more points than they did the previous year, but their grade dropped to a C. So the legislature, through the support of the board, I imagine, this was before I came to the board, but through the support of the board, I'm sure, changed that to a criterion referenced grading system. So we went through staff at the board in our support through the Center for Assessment and stakeholders, went through a process of setting those standards. And so that's the simplest answer that I can give you.
I feel like that was pretty simple, Darren. Janet, you good?
Okay, that made sense to me, so I appreciate the simplicity.
Okay, Janet, your third question.
The last, okay, this is it for me.
3, and that's all.
On line 84, we talk about schools having self-selected indicators or other indicators of choice. Just anecdotally, when I've gone through and looked at some schools, I've never seen a school that's put in their self-selected indicators or that have used that option. Is that just something I haven't seen? Is it used very much? Is it something that really isn't used?
Surprisingly, it is used quite a bit. In fact, when Board Member Hanson asked about the date in the rule, and I referenced that we've had to change the date for them publishing or submitting their self-reported indicators. An example would be last year with the first year of implementation. We published the report cards in January of 2018, the first week in January. We had asked LEAs to provide their self-reported indicators. I think it was in October was the deadline. We gave them up to the end of October to submit those. Then we extended that because it was the first year. So we had extended it to May 1st. Because we figured that once communities started looking at their school's report card, principals that hadn't chosen to enter self-reported indicators might feel an urgency then to do that, especially if they start to be compared to their neighborhood schools that did submit self-reported indicator information. So we set the deadline for May 1st. In our accountability technical meeting where we meet with the report card team, there was discussion about should we shut this off yet? And I had made the assumption that surely nobody is still interested in submitting self-reported indicators for their 2017-18 report card in May of 2018. And I was wrong. As soon as that closed, the very next day we had a school contact us that had tried to submit their self-reported indicator and wasn't able to do so. So I can't tell you how many. Aaron Bruff is on, and he may be able to know that answer. I don't know that for sure, but we do have an increasing number of schools. The second year that it was in play, we have more schools, I believe, who are also interested in submitting additional information about their school's achievement that aren't found in our traditional indicators.
Thank you, Darren. Aaron, did you want to respond to that if you're on?
I am on, and I don't know what the percentage is, but we know it's quite high. It's in about 95% of them do reply or input that information.
Janet, did that get you what you needed?
Okay. Yes, I appreciate knowing that. Just anecdotally, when I had looked, I'd never seen a school use it. So I'm glad to know it's being used. Thank you. Those are my questions.
Board Member Earl, you have another question?
Yes, thank you. Hopefully, we've got music going in the background now, so hopefully you guys don't get a lot of background noise. If you do, let me know. So my question, well, I guess a couple of things. We obviously we're still grading, right? Instead of that bill didn't pass again to get through so that we could keep it a little broader on our system. And Darren's explanation is thus the reason why grading, the letter grade doesn't articulate what is going on or what the real growth is or patterns, because there's so much variation, or depending on what's happening in a community can also impact or affect what's taking place there. So anyways, that was just my statement. I for some reason I went back through it and I was like, they passed that bill. I know it got towards the end, but it just didn't make it through, I guess, right? So that is my question. And I noticed we've aligned it with the terminology, but we still got the letter grades on there. So, oh, and my other comment is, did we ask, and maybe we aren't asking this yet, a waiver from this year because we're not going to get our data back because we don't have it. How is that working in this upcoming year? Are we waiting on that?
I think maybe Darren can comment on that.
Yeah, let me try to jump back in. Jeff, I think, I don't know if you're dragging this, you can scroll down. I think we've called out in this updated rule reference to the legislation, because you're correct, Board Member Earl. The legislature in this past session gave the board authority not to publish an overall school grade. Again, I'll use the term overall school grade. They didn't remove the requirement for us to in the future, so it's not permanently removed. But for this past year and for this current year that we're in, the report cards, the state board is not required to publish an overall school grade, which I think you're alluding to. Why do we even continue to keep this in the rule? And Jeff could maybe confirm this, but since the requirement isn't removed from the statute, it doesn't seem reasonable to then remove it from your board rule and then bring it back after these years have passed, and the requirement, if the requirement is still in place, then have to reinstitute the rule.
And then in addition to that, one more question, if you don't mind. I mean, our growth elements are going to be skewed too a little bit for those children that we only have a year of growth, right? But then they're 2 years further down, they should have 2 or 3 years. So there's a little bit of that that's going to be skewed moving forward as well. Is that an accurate statement? Or at least it won't be as concise as we want it and clean?
Correct. You're hitting on something that a lot of people might not have an awareness of or a sensitivity to right now, and that is that the way our growth is calculated, it takes into effect multiple years of achievement data and comparison groups. So there are some challenges we still have to address. The Assessment and Accountability Policy Advisory Committee is scheduled to meet on May 27th, and one of the agenda items for that group is to review options and possibilities of how we will what options are available for the board to deal with this interference of assessment, which has multiple year impacts on calculating student growth. So again, this is one of those answers that it sounds like it's too simplified for you right now, maybe, but we'll bring the complexities of that back to the board after the May 27th meeting, and we'll get a chance to talk about your question in a lot more detail in the coming months.
Okay, that sounds good. Thank you.
Great. Thank you for those questions and discussion. I don't see any more questions. I'm looking for a motion that we continue and approve our 277-497. Janet, go ahead.
I'll make a motion that we approve R277-497. Is that right?
Yes.
Draft 1 on first reading and forward it to the board for approval on second reading.
We
A
had
second and final reading.
we had that one correction, changing the year. Do we need to have it be draft 2 then?
Yes.
Okay, so let's
You.
let's have
Don't
it.
forget the continuation as well.
Okay. So let me restate the motion. I'll pretend you said.
Let's make that draft 2.
So the
Okay.
motion is to continue and approve R277-497 draft 2 on first reading and forward to the board for continuation and approval on second and final reading. Any discussion to that motion? Okay, let's go ahead and take a vote. Board Member Marsh?
Aye.
Board Member Cannon? Board Member Cannon? If you are speaking, you are muted.
Aye. Okay. I was saying aye and I was muted. So
I figured you
can
were
you hear me
saying aye
now?
to room. Board Member Earl?
Aye.
And Board Member Hanson?
Aye.
And I'm an aye as well, so that motion passes unanimously. Okay, thanks everyone. I just want to kind of have you check in with time. We have about an hour and a half and we are not quite halfway through our agenda, so just keep that in mind. We want to make sure we get enough discussion, but just be aware of that as we move forward. So this action item is R277498. This is a grant for math teaching training, but it's a repeal because the funding's gone, and I believe Jeffrey Van Holten and maybe Jennifer will be there to help us out with this one. So Jeff, do you want to start us off?
Sure. This rule was up for continuation as well. And upon review, we discovered the last time we received funding for it was 2016. We have finished spending out that money. And this program and rule is going to go away, and it is now evolving into the STEM Endorsement Initiative program. So you'll be seeing a new rule come later on to highlight that program as it begins to go online in relation to last legislative session when the STEM Action Center, the endorsement was taken from the STEM Action Center at the governor's office and moved over to USBE.
Okay, thank you for that. Do we have any questions from committee members? Okay, seeing none, I think I will go ahead and make the motion that the committee repeal R277498 on first reading and recommend the board repeal the rule on second and final reading. Do we have any discussion to that motion? Okay, seeing none, let's go ahead and take a vote. Vice Chair Marsh?
Aye.
Board Member Cannon?
Aye.
Board Member Earl?
Aye.
Board Member Hanson?
Aye.
And I'm an aye as well, so that motion carries unanimously. Okay, thank you. That was a quick and easy one. Let's go ahead and move to action item number 6, R277607. This is an amendment and a continuation of truancy prevention rule. I believe we have Corby Eason, our prevention specialist, and Jeffrey Van Holten on to talk about this for us.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So this is R277607, and it is being continued, and it's also before you due to House Bill 14. Although most of the edits related to House Bill 14 are very technical, really just kind of in this definition section to reflect the updates from House Bill 14. The other area of this rule, we do redefine the truancy policy and call it the absenteeism and truancy policy. We want this to be more inclusive and addressing not just the truancy element, but absenteeism generally, which it's supposed to do anyway. We just wanted the title to reflect that. You will notice a substantive change unrelated to House Bill 14, starting on line 36 LEAs are required to create and operate an attendance review team as described down below in the section that is created. I will highlight on line 51, we have added an amendment that was requested by the State Superintendents Association. So when you're making your motion, keep that in mind. This highlights who or the area of expertise, more or less, that would be needed for your attendance review team. So you've got all of these listed here. And essentially, the idea would be that the attendance review team would look at the data and the interventions being applied on at least a monthly basis. We do have some LEAs who are making this review once a year. So that is a very difficult time for them to turn around and make adjustments after all of the year is over, the absenteeisms are done, the truancies have already happened. Makes them more reactive than proactive. So we wanted to make sure that we were getting them to review this data on a more regular basis. The vast majority of LEAs, as we spoke to the Superintendent's Association, said, we already do this. This isn't new. They were actually very surprised to hear that there were some LEAs that do this annually versus more regularly. That's kind of the idea behind what you're seeing in front of you. I will, if the chair is amenable to it, pass the torch over to Corby to kind of highlight some more of the philosophies and the ideas behind this.
Excellent. Corby, are you there?
Yes. Can everyone hear me and see me?
Yes. Well, I can
Awesome.
hear you. There you are.
Awesome. My name is Corby Eason. I'm a prevention specialist in student support. Today, I'd like to really highlight the purpose of the tennis review team. One of the things that I have done over the last few years that I've been at the agency is to attend chronic absenteeism network. And this is a network that is facilitated by the United Way, and it meet with LEAs across the state to deal with chronic absenteeism. And one of the first thing I noticed throughout my time there, the LEAs that came with a team and worked as a team, they were more effective and more proactive. And the LEAs that only had one individual that was solely responsible for doing the function of monitoring and creating tier interventions to deal with absenteeism, they seem more overwhelmed and they stress frustration. And also, I would highlight about the team again. The goal is to be proactive, reviewing data on a monthly basis to be able to identify which student need what support. And the idea is, again, we want to put the parents in the center. So we want to be parent-centered and school-supported, and be able to engage the parent as best as possible. And that's another area of improvement that needs to happen is parent engagement, because we want the parent to be the center of saying what is best for the student when it comes to the reason and the barriers of why they are not attending school regularly. And so that's one of the things I want to emphasize, because most likely when we are reactive, we are waiting for a student to reach a certain threshold of missing days to be able to intervene with a letter. And that letter is very written in a lawyer point of view. I mean, it's very legal, and it may be hard for parents to understand that legal aspect of some of these letters that are going out to the home. And again, we want to separate that the student that need the minor adjustment in their class schedule versus student that we have to remove more barriers to get them attend regularly. And again, we don't want to force. We don't want to have the school take sole responsibility. We know truancy absenteeism is a very complex issue, and it may lead to many other things that the community we play that can pay down the road with, like the kind of hold on, breathe. Criminal rates and also other bad things that the community will have to pay for down the road. And so again, we're going to be able to gather all the resources that we need to be able to support students and family on an individual basis.
Thank you.
Sorry. sorry for that big picture. I mean, it's such a complex issue. I just want to lay out everything.
No, that's so excellent. Do we have any questions from committee for Jeff? Board Member Earl, go ahead.
I don't know necessarily that I have a question, but I agree with exactly what's being said here, that as we move more from a punitive effort into a supportive effort, I think we're going to get to the root of what some of the concerns are with families or some of the needs they have and the barriers that are there. So I'm glad we're moving in this direction, and that we're also separating this out from truancy and absenteeism and finding, the needs between those two and not trying to clump them together, because they can be misconstrued and numbers can be skewed in a way that may not be beneficial for families or communities. So that's just my comment.
Yeah, great point. Board Member Cannon. Janet, if you are speaking, you are muted.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yay! This made me think of sitting at a USBA dinner next to a woman who was a principal at a Native American high school. And she was addressing this issue, saying how difficult it was for them to get the students there and to have some kind of a school schedule, because the students didn't even have clocks in their homes. They didn't know what time it was. And I just wondered if maybe Corby or someone could comment on the challenges of working with the Native American population on this type of issue.
Well, that's such a good point, Janet. Corby, do you want to comment on that?
Yes, and I can just say it just in general. Just each family has different access to different means, and therefore we have to really see, again, on an individual basis, what resource and what support each family need to get them to attending school regularly, instead of making assumptions of they just don't want to be involved, or the parents do not care. And so it's really connecting them to community resources, or being able to, I know a situation at the school, they decided to start the first period a little later to make sure that kids get to school on time. I mean, again, allow the flexibilities so each each LEA and each individual school can do what best based off what the data is telling them. Again, the goal is to make a data-driven decision, not just of this is my assumption of decision.
Thank you, Corby.
Thank you. I'm all in favor for the start school later, especially for high schoolers.
And you don't need a call, right? Board Member, Vice Chair Mark Marsh.
Thank you, Chair. I'm agreeant with Corby. This is a better process to go through. I'm a little, I guess, perplexed that some LEAs are only looking at their truancy or absenteeism once a year. I know that most of them probably are looking at it weekly, but to report on it more often gives us a chance to diagnose what the issues at hand and be able to help them during the process, rather than just assessing them at the end of the year. That's almost like an autopsy, saying, oh gosh, this is why they died, but we're too late now, so we'll try better next time. So I like the route that we're taking with this. Thank you.
Board Member Earl, another question?
No. Oh, sorry. I'd like to make a motion.
Great. Go ahead.
The motion is that the committee continue and approve R277-607, draft 1 on first reading and forward to the board for approval on second and final reading.
I wanted to check with that motion. There was an amendment on line 51. Are you okay to have as amended?
Yeah. Oh, as amended. Yes. Sorry.
Okay. Thank you. I just wanted to make
that.
So the motion before the committee is that we continue and approve R277607. Draft 1 is amended on first reading and forward to the board for approval on second and final reading. Is there any discussion to that motion? I see Vice Chair Marsh's hand up.
Sorry, forgot to take it down.
Oh, that's okay. You're just waving. Any other?
Yes, I am.
Yeah. Any other discussion to the motion? Okay, seeing none, let's go ahead and take a vote. Vice Chair Marsh.
Aye.
Board Member Cannon.
Aye.
Board Member Earl.
Aye.
Board Member Hanson.
Aye.
Hey, I'm an aye as well. Thank you. Thank you, Corby.
Thank you.
Okay, let's go ahead. We are on action item number 7, which is R277625. This is the mental health screener. This is new as a result of House Bill 323. And I know that we have Jeff Van Holten and Christy Walker here for us to give us some support information and information.
Yes, thank you, Chair. This is Rule 625, R277625, based on legislation passed this session, House Bill 323, which created 53-522. So I just wanted to kind of go through, I wanted to first highlight for you that I'm going to be speaking to draft 3. Several committee members have had some great edits and requests, and you've worked with staff, and everybody is in agreement on this version. And Christy can also speak to some of those things as well. So you'll see between draft 2 and draft 3 are more clarity in language. I would say there's nothing substantively different between the two drafts. If you've been reading draft 2, this should all read relatively the same in terms of the gist and the intent.
Jeff, can I just stop you for 1 minute? If you're, we're having a little bit of feedback, or at least I am, could you all just check to make sure you are muted while Jeff is talking? Okay, continue, Jeff.
Great. So we've just got just to give you a highlight of what House Bill 323 did. It allows an LEA to administer a screening program, which is defined in the bill to be a mental health screening program. So an LEA can provide mental health screeners to students if the parents opt in. The bill then does require that the board, via rule, specify the different mental health conditions that can be screened, and the approval process an LEA has to go through in order to select and administer a screening program. There is also a second part of the bill that a qualifying parent may receive financial assistance from an LEA, and the LEA can in turn get reimbursed from USBE for the money given if they have a student who needs interventions that the school cannot provide in the school setting, and therefore they have to go outside of the school setting and pay for those services out of their own pocket. The bill came with $500,000. I mention that here because it's a very small amount of money, which, as you may be aware, is likely on the table of being cut due to the economic downturn we're experiencing during the pandemic. So some of the language around how we would distribute money, you'll notice, is vague because it is difficult given a lot of the variables in this rule and the program, especially how many LEAs want to opt in, what are the needs of those different LEAs will really depend on who's in and who's out in offering this. So it was hard to commit to a formula. We are open to suggestions, but we kind of left it a little more vague at this point just because without a lot of money, it's hard to figure out a true distribution model like we see with other grants. So that is a component of this rule, but the big part I want to highlight for you is the approval process for getting a screener. We wanted to simplify that, so we made sure that there's going to be a pre-approved list that will be approved by the board. And if an LEA opts to use one from the approval list, they just have to notify staff that they are using which one they are using. If there is one that is not on the list, you will notice there is an approval process for how to get the one you would like as an LEA if it's not on the list. And it's a fairly milquetoast approval process. It needs to meet all the requirements of the rule and the code, and specify the reasons why you're choosing that one versus one from the pre-approved list. And then we also are required by the law to create the rule around data access and privacy for the data that is collected and used by the screening program. So you'll see the section for data privacy. We really stay true to referencing all of the state and federal laws that apply, and also make sure that there is parental involvement up front before consenting and opting in regarding all of the data that would be potentially used and shared, and how that would work. And we also allow parent, if they want to opt into allowing the information to be shared with a school's multidisciplinary team. That would be an opt-in if the parent would like that shared. I'm happy to go over any of the big changes that are here before you in green and purple. We just highlighted and expanded out more clarity around what it is we're looking for. The board will also approve the mental health conditions that can and cannot be screened. So you'll be getting a list of screeners and mental health conditions to be screened coming your way in the future for approval. But I will go ahead and stop for now and address more specific questions. Chair Gravitt, you are muted as well.
Well, thank you. I guess you read my lips. That's hilarious. Okay. Board Member Hanson, you have a question.
I have a couple. Thank you. First, and I'll direct these to Jeff, if that's okay, Chair. So we have a definition on line 20, I believe, of it's not line 20 anymore, 22, a qualifying parent. And my question is, and we discussed this via email, I think, a little bit last night and this morning. That is defined in the code, but then we go on and say that it's that plus these other things. I wonder if we shouldn't, and my suggestion is we make that an eligible parent. An eligible parent is a qualified parent who also meets criteria. I think we have a difficult time double defining parent if it means something different in our rule than it does in the code. So that one suggestion.
So I'll bring up the bill itself and the language that I'm looking at.
Okay.
We can discuss. I think there are two different ways to read this language. So I could see it going in either direction, and I am happy to take whatever direction the committee would like. But right here, I'm going to highlight, hopefully it's still easy to read, the qualifying parent definition. And you'll notice on line 213 and 14, subpart 2 says, a qualifying parent means a parent who qualifies for financial assistance to pay for the resources under rules made by the state board. So I am reading that to allow us to add additional criteria for what qualifies a parent for financial assistance. Like you could also read that to say under rules made by the state board in reference to paying for the resources. But there's nothing else left in the bill that talks about the actual resources being paid for versus whether or not a parent qualifies for the financial assistance. So I defaulted on this would allow us to add the different elements and criteria of what would qualify a parent for the financial assistance. It's kind of confusing, but I'm happy to discuss or if you have differing thoughts.
Just one other idea, if I may, Chair.
Yes, please.
We say define a qualifying parent the same as in the code, and then just say parent is eligible for financial assistance or in order to be eligible for financial assistance, a qualifying parent must, and then list out those criteria. Would that clarify a bit?
I like that edit, actually, very much so.
That's great.
Okay, then I have just a couple more questions. Language on this qualifying for financial resources. Let's see, it's down in the 30s, 30, 40. It moved a little bit on me. So let's look at line 30. So the LEA, actually, sorry, let's go back up to line 28. This says that the LEA is going to determine that a student demonstrates the greatest need. I have a problem with that greatest and how we determine that. That's a subjective word. And do we have to have a pool of students then, 100 students screened before we can determine which ones have the greatest need? Or if someone comes in and gets a screening and has some obvious needs, do we go ahead and provide for them? Or how does an LEA deal with that greatest word?
I think that's a really good question, and one for the committee to decide if they would like to keep or not. And the reason why it's there, again, goes back to the funding being so small. And so the question, we're clearly going to have to pick which students, assuming the LEA does not have the services that can be provided. All right, I'm like looking over here where you are, but I realize my camera's right here. If the LEA can't provide the services in the school setting, we then have to look at those students and decide, are we going to do this on a rolling basis? So it's first come, first served, or if we're going to wait, as you're saying, and identify the ones with the greatest need and prioritize the funding that way, which presents its own issue with at what point do you make the call, right? Because the screening doesn't necessarily have to happen once a year. It can be available throughout the year, and a parent can opt in, and trained staff could administer on a rolling basis. So I think you're highlighting a very real issue that staff has also been grappling with, because the funding is so small. It's difficult to decide and determine which students and their parents get the funding for outside services and which ones don't. We can take away greatest if the committee feels they would prefer that word deleted. We could kind of approach this more on a first come, first serve, which might be really the only way we can do this as fair as possible, because you also would have students waiting for services as we get a critical mass to make a determination of who's greatest. I think it's
I would be more comfortable with greatest out of there unless we have defined how greatest is determined for the LEAs. Otherwise, I think we put them at some risk. If someone reads this and says, well, my student didn't get services, this one did, my student's needs are greater than the other student who was serviced, I think maybe demonstrate need and then let the LEAs sort it out, but not have them tied to the rule until we can come up with a good methodology would be a better approach. The next question is about the next lines. We're going to determine that they are underinsured or uninsured or ineligible for Medicaid. Are we going to require financial and insurance information from the families of all the students who are screened? Are the LEAs going to be gathering that information?
So Christy, I'm going to defer to Christy on this particular list. I am less familiar with how these determinations are made with local mental health authorities. But I know this was something that was included when we consulted with DSAMA on the rule at the Division of Substance Abuse and Mental Health.
Sure.
I will say the Superintendent's Association had the same question about the word underinsured and how that was going to be made, and whether or not they would just rely on the local mental health authority to determine what that means and just rely on them, or if they wanted to collect financial data, which I did not get the sense they wanted to be collecting all of that information and storing it. So, Christy, do you mind if I bring you in on that discussion?
No, not at all. So can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes, perfect. All right. So one of the issues that we find with students accessing services is all of these things. And so you have the uninsured, underinsured, non-Medicaid students who can't necessarily access services because of that gap that they fall into. And so that's not really a place that LEAs live as far as, checking on insurance. And so I understand your concern there. And that's where we pull in our local mental health agencies, because they are most likely going to be providing those services anyways, or helping to find the resources in the community to offer those services. And so that's something they could work with the parent on. The underinsured by itself can be very difficult, because you may have a parent who has insurance, but because of what the insurance doesn't cover, the parent is left footing a $500 a month bill for them to meet with someone who can meet their needs. And so this really is a very complex issue, and that's why pulling in our local mental health authorities is going to be really helpful in making those determinations. Does that answer your question?
Helps me understand. I'm not sure it answers the question because it is pretty complex, but thank you for the information. Yeah. I'm wondering if and I would really like to keep our schools out of this area, trying to determine whether a student is underinsured. I wonder if we could say, instead of in consultation with the local mental health authority, if we could put the burden on them to determine the financial viability of a family obtaining these services on their own, because this says that the school's going to determine it in consultation. Is there a way to turn that back on the mental health authority? Because I know, like Weber Human Services up here, they would routinely gather all that information, figure out how services need to be provided. And then we wouldn't have to have any of that information in our databases at the schools. We could just have them check the box as to whether there is a financial need. Is that possible under what's out to do that, to push it back on them?
Is that possible? Someone respond to that?
And Chris, you'll have to correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like that would be possible. And so my question is, if I make the edit you're seeing on the screen, does that speak to the concern? We take the LEA out of the question or the equation and say, as determined by the local mental health authority, demonstrates need as determined by we would actually take out this as well. So it would read, as determined by the local mental health authority, demonstrates need, including being. So we're specifying the criteria for need, but the determinator, or the person determining, would be the local mental health authority instead of the LEA.
I'm sorry, Chair, may I continue?
Yeah, please.
So I think that's okay, except for, will we ask the local mental health authority to do D, or is that our screen? We're just going to give them the results of our screening exam, and then they will look at the financials, look at those results, and make a determination?
Yes, based on how it's written.
Okay, I'm certainly more comfortable with that if that works in the big scheme of things with this this bill.
So would it be possible, Chair, if I may?
Yeah, please, Christy.
On line 27, Jeff, if you scroll back up for me, where it talks about as determined by the local mental health authority, can we say as recommended?
Good.
Good. Because ultimately the determination is made by the LEA.
Okay, but the mental health authority does have to come down and say, yes, we recommend that this is a student that should receive services. Okay. One more question, I think just one more. Don't hold me to that. Where does this put us with regard to HIPAA? So we're starting to gather information that's going to be health protected information and starting to deal with that realm. I'd like to keep that all out of the schools if we can. but we've got the financial information. Now we've got a diagnosis or at least a screening of a student that says there's some mental health issues. Is that going into a school's database? And I know we have FERPA educational data, but this looks like medical data to me. Has that been talked about at all?
Yes, to some extent. And Whitney, I know that you were on here as well.
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, this is Whitney Phillips, the Chief Privacy Officer. And this is a common question that we have. Schools do have health data. Schools, nurses have whether a student has an allergy or that kind of information. And that is actually protected by FERPA, even though it is it's a health record. So this information would be protected by FERPA, not HIPAA, because it is being maintained by the school. And so I think in that case, HIPAA doesn't apply. It would be FERPA.
Follow up for Whitney?
Yeah, go ahead.
So this data is going to be going back and forth between a local mental health authority and the school. Is it just going to change character depending on who's holding the data? So it'll be FERPA data with the school and HIPAA data with the mental health authority?
That's exactly right. And one thing that does come into play with HIPAA and school that I'm not too familiar with is for billing. And so if there is a billing of these medical services, that information would be protected by HIPAA. And so in that case, for just billing purposes, but as far as the student's health information, when it's in the school, it's FERPA, and when it's within, another kind of health organization, that would be HIPAA. I know it's a little foggy.
So again, follow up. The release forms that we have for information, would those need to be both FERPA and HIPAA compliant if parents are going to allow that data to be used outside the school, or we need to look at the release forms as well?
Well, the information that would be disclosed would be going from the school to the health organization. And so that would be, with parental consent, be able to be disclosed. The side that HIPAA will come into play is just for the billing, and that would that's kind of on the side of the health organization. And we can, I guess, work out the details of this, but the schools would only be responsible to follow FERPA and not HIPAA.
Okay, as long as that's clear, I'm a bit concerned. Okay, those are my questions. Thank you for the time.
Oh, thank you, Scott. Board Member Earl.
Yes. Thank you. So kind of along that lines, and now I've got to see if we've built this in. We need to make sure that parents know, if I'm understanding this right, that the data will automatically go to the health department from these. Is that accurate, or only for those needing interventions or services will that automatically go? And if it does automatically go, parents need to have foreknowledge that the health department will be storing and reviewing that information. So now I might have to look back at I'm just taking notes as I was listening to the questions and comments. Do we address that? And I can look back too. I'm just trying to make sure in my, that I'm getting that out there, that we're hitting every consent.
Chair, if I may.
Yes, please.
So one thing I do want to remind everyone is, as we're talking about this data and it being transferred back and forth, this is only in relation to if a parent wants to get reimbursed and financial assistance for services that their student is going to get outside of the school setting. So we're talking about a subset of those being screened. If the parent does not want the financial assistance, none of this applies to that parent. That being said, if we wanted to make sure that it's very clear that when they're giving consent, that we call out the fact that if you opt into financial assistance, please be aware that there will be sharing of your student data to a mental health authority, or it could be whomever they choose. They're not limited by going to a government-run mental health authority. They can go to a private practice as well and receive that financial assistance. The bill did not limit who the service provider had to be in order to get the assistance.
So Jeff, I'm actually wondering if, I mean, it could be addressed there, but I'm also wondering if when they go over results with the parent, or when the parent sent those results, that's the best place for that, not on the front end. Just so, I mean, we could acknowledge it there, but there should be acknowledgement when the results are given to a parent, that as far as their options, that they have that knowledge at that point. I think that's where that's better suited. Would you?
Yes.
So
we could make an amendment. I'm just looking for a good spot where we could place that. If you have other questions you want to ask while I'm kind of searching, feel free.
Yeah.
Okay, just a second. Let me look back at my notes. Okay, my other question is whether, let's say the legislature does not fund, and I'm not even sure, I think they're funding the payment of the screener. I think this is open for using counseling funding. Someone can correct me if I'm wrong. The other counseling funding that's going on through other bills and other methods can be used for this as well. But I think the funding here, the small amount, was intended specifically for the screener. But my question is this: if there is no money, we still need this screener rule in place. Is this screener rule negated, or mental health screener program negated if the money's not there? Because it needs to be there, because we have schools using it and they need parameters in which to have, work with parents in this realm. So that's my question. Is there, I don't know if anybody can help in answering that.
Chair, if I may.
Yeah.
So the funding, the $500,000, we were instructed by Representative Nielsen that funding was supposed to be both for the financial assistance scholarships for qualifying parents, as well as assisting LEAs in procuring a mental health screening program. The bill does not require the money to be present in order for an LEA to spend their own money that they already have to procure a mental health screening program. So if the funding goes away, the opportunity for an LEA to opt in and participate per the conditions in this rule and in the code would still be available. They would just have to pay for it themselves. So it would not negate the rule by any means. The rule would still apply whether or not they got the funding from us. The funding is not the hook on which these conditions are contingent upon.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure on that, just because we have a need now for this rule to be in place, and making sure that the funding in some way did not preclude that from happening or prevent that.
Great point. Did you have other questions or concerns, Jenny?
I think I'm good on this one so far. So I'm looking back at my notes.
There are other questions, and I know Jeff was going to work with a spot to put that in so that parents were aware of any kind of data sharing. Do we have any other questions from committee members?
Jenny, I have one more. I'll wait.
Okay. Go ahead, Scott.
I told you not to hold me to it.
I didn't. I threw those words out of my ears as soon as I heard them.
156, 158. This is talking about the time period that we're looking at. And says if a qualifying parent has received reimbursement for the same relevant resources in a prior calendar year, then the LEA may provide, well, they can't provide reimbursement if they've received it in the prior calendar year. I wondered why we went with calendar year, because that could result in the student receiving services up until the end of the Christmas break, and then being cut off in the latter part of the year. And we're not for most schools, there won't be any services provided during the summer. So I wondered why we're calendar instead of school year on this.
Great question.
Yes, and I'll have Christy back me up on this and tell me if I'm in left field as to why. But this was requested by the Division of Substance Abuse and Mental Health, and their concern was for the same reason, but looking at a different timeline, that the services would end as the school year ended, and they would need to continue. And so they wanted it to be more of a calendar year basis. There was also concern from the Superintendents Association originally. Actually, Royce Van Tassel with the Charter School Association pointed out, why are we preventing a parent or a student from coming back year over year if they have really intensive services? The only reason why we're putting this in the rule again is because the funding is so limited. We're trying to spread it out as much as we could amongst those who do apply or need it, which again makes you have to make some weird and awkward decisions in terms of which students more in need. But this was just in request from DSAMA. There is, I don't know if, Christy, there are other reasons why we'd want calendar year over school year. I am not particularly married to either timeline. But if there is another big reason we should keep calendar over school year, Christy can jump in and let us know.
I think you touched on it, Jeff. With services being tied to the school year, these services that they're being reimbursed for, these are actually outside in the community. They're ones that cannot be provided by the school. And so having it be for a calendar year allows them to still receive services throughout the summer, through the breaks. And so it provides just that little gap. It speaks to the gap that may be there otherwise.
Can I follow up?
Yes, of course.
So I understand that. Maybe it fits their model better, but for us, we could have a student who's going from, say, elementary into junior high or junior high to high school and have to transfer this to a new school if the services are going to be provided through a calendar year. So they would be initiated, say, in a 9th grade setting, and then the student goes to 10th grade and has to be transferred to a new setting. Is that, I don't know whose needs outweigh the others, but it seems like from our point of view, administratively, that could get very difficult. I also think, cutting off in the middle of a school year has the same kind of a downside as cutting off in the summer. And if we needed to take it to a June, June 31st or something, put it in the middle of the year to satisfy both people. So there's both sides. So there's not any more of a gap. Like the summer break would possibly be a gap if we said school year, and that might make sense, but maybe you can help me understand that.
And Jeff, I'm wondering if we had any feedback from Superintendents Association on that specifically.
That particular piece, no.
Okay.
As Christy highlighted again, this is only for those receiving the services outside of the school setting. So there was less concern from this group overall because the LEAs would not be the group responsible for the services. So the parent opting into private services of some kind. I don't know if I'm speaking directly to all of the concerns or questions, but.
Are the education associations still on the hook for the billing portion of it and some of that? That's all going to be transferred over. So we just identify and then transfer them over to them and wash our hands of it, basically? Is that?
Yes, essentially the way that the bill is written is that the tool is not diagnostic. It's just supposed to kind of give red flags, for lack of a better word, as to potential conditions a student might have. It is then on the parent to decide whether or not they're going to seek a diagnostic. Some LEAs have school psychologists, for example, that would be able to provide that diagnostic test if the parent opts in pursuant to state law. But otherwise, it would be on the parent to seek the diagnoses from an outside entity and then determine whether or not the school has the resources within the school setting to provide services or they don't. The parent would then still determine whether or not, even if the school has the ability, the parent would decide if they want to go to a private practice or not. That particular detail would then determine whether or not they're a qualifying parent for financial assistance, because if the school offers it and they opt for the private, they can't get the financial assistance. But there's nothing here that requires that the school then get involved in the billing process for services that are received outside of the school setting.
One more follow-up.
Yeah, go ahead.
Could we solve the problem, if there is a problem? Hopefully I'm not just making up a problem, but by saying that a parent can only receive services for 1 year from the date that the services are initiated, then you wouldn't have the problem of being initiated in November and cut off in December. Would that be helpful?
I like that edit.
Yeah.
Christy, I don't know how you feel, but
Yeah, Chair, if I may chime in. So yeah, I like the idea of having it be for the 1 year, and then could we also add possibly that they could reapply for the following year? Because I know part of this wording was centered around, we don't want all of the funding going to just one student or to, a very small select group of students. We want to make it a little more equitable in who can receive those. And so if we could say, for 1 year, and then also they have the option to reapply after the 1 year of services.
Great.
Or the LEA can consider them for continued services.
Great. Jeff, do you want to try to make those changes and we can take a look at them?
yes.
Sorry to put you on the spot.
It's all right. I'm learning. Group editing is what we do in committee, so that is just fine.
And then you may have noticed, I don't want to interrupt you while you're on that, in the chat box, Board Member Earl mentioned that maybe after line 137, who has access to the data for that other issue we were discussing.
Okay. Yep.
If that works.
So
yeah.
Can I speak to that just real quick? So if we added and applicable available resources and who has access to mental health screening program data. So when you report to the parent that those results, it seems like that would be the time to re-articulate that or articulate that fully. So does that work there?
Yeah.
Okay, let's see. Scott, did you have something else?
No, I'll take my hand down. Thank you.
Thank you.
That sounds like it works for me.
That's great. Do we have any other questions or concerns? I know we want to give Jeff a minute to kind of work through those things, but be thinking about if this is something that you guys feel comfortable with. Once these amendments are in place, changes are in place, you feel comfortable with making a motion. If there's any other questions or concerns, speak now.
How does that read for everybody?
Yeah, Jeff, will you just read it out loud for us?
Mm-hmm. So, I could do my copy and paste.
This is exciting watching it in action.
You're watching my brain on a page.
It's like an action show.
Get out the popcorn. So, as provided in subsection D, if the qualifying parent has received reimbursement for the same relevant services within 1 year, or it could be the same year from the initiating date. I'm actually going to say same year. Sorry. I think out loud. So within the same year from the initiating date of services for the student. Or initial date.
Christy, is that good? Christy, I just want to make sure she's okay with that.
Yeah, I think that looks great, Jeff.
Can I chime in? Help me understand how same year, what does that mean? Same calendar year, same, I think 1 year is more clear to me than same year, but Help me understand what that is.
It was meeting 12 months from the date, but within 1 year from the date services.
Okay, how does that look, everyone? And I don't know if we want to just quickly just go over the amendments that were made on the lines, just to kind of, Jeff, could you just like run through the things that we changed before we make a motion to make sure we're all good with that?
Yes, and I will work backwards if that's all right.
That's great. Thank you so much.
So the amendment right here on 157 and 160 regarding the timeline. So it's now within 1 year from the date services began.
That's 157 and 158.
Then on line 138, we added in the results, applicable available services, or available resources, comma, and who has access to the screening program data.
Okay.
And I believe the other amendment that we made has not actually been fully made yet, and that was under qualifying parent. We will say it means the same as the term as defined in, and then state that a qualifying parent who wants to receive the services must have the following criteria, which might take a little more tweaking than I probably want to take our time doing, but that's what I will commit to do for the draft for the board.
And then I think we had one on line 28 with taking out greatest.
Yes.
And I can't remember. Did we do anything else with that?
It was on line 27. All these purple areas we struck out.
Okay. Committee members, do you have any questions or comments or thoughts on any of those things? Or are you feeling good about it? Are we ready for a motion?
Chair Gravitt?
Yes.
Hey, this is Board Member Marks. I feel good with what we've done. Jenny and Scott really answered most of the questions that I had in my mind.
Yes.
And we worked them out. So if you're ready for a motion, I would like to do that if you do.
Please.
Then I would recommend that we approve R277-625 Draft 2 on the first reading and forward to the board for approval on the second and final reading.
Okay. So the motion before the committee is to approve R277-625 Draft 2.
Draft 3.
Oh,
Draft 3.
Sorry. Thank you.
Okay, Draft 3 then.
Draft 3 as amended, right?
Oh, Draft 3 is amended?
Yes.
Yes, that's
forgot.
correct.
Thank you, Norley. As amended on first reading and forward to the board for approval on second and final reading. And then Norley, are you okay? I mean, I know Jeff got them, but are you okay with the places where they were amended, the lines? Did you catch those?
Yep, line 22, 27, 28, 20, 38, 138, 157, 158.
Yes. Oh, you are so great.
Awesome.
Okay. Any discussion to that motion? Okay. Seeing none, let's go ahead and take a vote. Vice Chair Marsh.
Aye.
Board Member Cannon.
Aye.
Board Member Earl.
Aye.
Board Member Hanson.
Aye.
And I'm an aye as well. So that motion passes. You guys, great work. Thank you for catching these things. Excellent. Thanks, Jeff, for working on the spot, and Christy for your input. You guys are awesome. Okay, we are moving on to action item number 8. We have 30 minutes. We can do this. This is R277-723. This is Start Smart Utah program. This is a new program as a result of House Bill 222. I believe we have Jeffrey Van Holten and Amanda Neal for the kill.
Neal for the kill, that's right. And Kathleen Britton is also online, I believe, the director of Child Nutrition Program.
Thank you.
So very quickly, this is House Bill 222. This was staff requested legislation that passed in this last session. created the Start Smart Utah program that requires that if you have a student population at a certain percentage or higher that's on free and reduced lunch, that you offer an alternative breakfast model, meaning breakfast after instruction has begun for the day, so food's still available. The bill does require that percentage, or if you participate in the National Lunch Program, that you also participate in the National School Breakfast Program. The bill then does offer a waiver from those two requirements it creates, and the waiver was as described by board rule. So this is the rule that outlines the waiver from those requirements that are now required by 53G-9-205.1. It's created by House Bill 222 and goes into effect next week. A lot of laws actually go into effect next week. Side note, use that as your party conversation. Guess what? I know. Fun fact. So the waiver process, we modeled it after Rule 121, which is the waiver from board rule. So it reads very similar to how an LEA would get a waiver of board rule requirements. So they have to, in an open meeting of their local board, vote and approve the waiver. You have to describe the logistical and financial hardships that are resulting in the request for the waiver and how they might mitigate those in the future to prevent them from needing to seek a waiver in the future. So most of that reads fairly like 121, a little more specific to this particular program. What I did want to highlight was that these waivers are going to be for one school year, and they have to be per school. You cannot seek a waiver for the LEA at large. So it would be for each school within the LEA that meets the criteria of the law and need to be exempt. You need to get an independent waiver for each one. The reason why we did that is because there are different principals at every school and different staff members at every school. So they all have different capacity, even if the food service director at the LEA level might see, oh, well, we got like 3 or 4 schools. They have maybe 3 or 4 others that actually could do this. So we wanted to make sure that we were bringing everyone on board that is able. But it's a fairly short rule. I probably will just stop talking for now and let you guys ask questions if you have any or if there are any concerns. We've got staff online to help answer any of the questions as well.
This is non-substantive, but just on line 35, there's just the cost benefit analysis, just a little hyphen.
Excellent.
And then just while we're there on 39, nonprofit, is there a reason that's capitalized?
It's actually the title of the account as outlined in that part of federal code. Yep.
Okay, thank you for that. Board Member Earl, you have a question?
Yeah, I have several. Actually, this whole thing is messy for me, so you're going to have to bear with me. And I apologize for not getting any amendments or anything ahead of time because I was using what we had attached, and we don't have the law that's going to go into effect attached. So I was kind of using other information. And actually, there's 2 laws that affect this particular rule. So let me just see what I can do, because this, like I said, this is a really messy one, trying to get it right in relationship to the law, and then understanding why we went the way we went in our procedures. So hopefully I can articulate enough. We may have to just watch time. I would almost make an amendment. We move this to next month already, but let's see where we can get on things. Just because, like I said, what we've attached to our resources I was using, but it's not the new law. So that it changes the whole thing. Okay, so just a couple of things.
Let me just stop you for 1 second.
Okay.
You brought
Yeah, go ahead.
I want to just ask, just because we have 4 more things and just looking at time, Jeff, or can anybody comment, is this something we could move to next time or wait till the end? Like, what is the priority here?
I may defer to Amanda and Kathleen on how they feel about it, and just working backwards in timelines. If we move this to June and you do not have a July board meeting, which you might, but if you don't, then it would hit the August board meeting. September would be the public comment 30 days, and it would not go into effect until October, which would prevent LEAs from being able to seek a waiver.
Right. So this is pretty important.
Started.
Okay. I just wanted to know that. Jenny, go ahead.
All right, and like I said, this is kind of messy. We're asking for verification that the LEA, okay, so it's line 30, voted to request the waiver in an open meeting. And yet in the law, it merely asks for a community council or trust lands meeting. And not that doesn't need to be an open meeting, that still falls under that. But we've changed who we're asking to do that with. That's one. Then another question I have is, what do we want a waiver from? It references different things. Do we want a waiver from doing the traditional breakfast, or do we want a waiver from having to do the what's the other term? Sorry, I'm not finding it right offhand. The breakfast in the classroom, whatever that term is, alternative. Is that right? Or a waiver from having to participate in the program at the full level, or do we want a waiver from doing the program at all? Okay, so those are a couple questions. And how many of our schools are already doing? I mean, 70% free and reduced, and then in another year it's 50, then it's 30. What are they the ones seeking the waiver, or if they already qualify under this area, do they need to get a different waiver? And then also under our recommendation for waiver, we've defined several items in here. For example, logistics hardship, financial hardship. But those are our definitions of that. Is it possible that and I know we leave it open a little bit, possibilities of what that could look like, but is there research that backs that information for doing that? And then I have a general concern that we're requesting, and I know this is in the law, we're requesting this is done every year. It just seems, and for every LEA or every school within an LEA, are we just saying everybody do this and then no questions asked? I'm just trying to understand why we put such it seems to me a burden, because you've got to verify and validate with all this information yearly. Used to be every 3 years you could, that an LEA could kind of rotate their schools and, look at this type of information. So sorry, those are just lots of questions, and that's just the beginning. I don't know if anyone wants to get started, and then
sure.
We'll go from there.
Yeah, absolutely. So to address the first concern, I'm going to bring in House Bill 222. And there's nothing in the bill that requires school community council over the LEA governing board. You may be getting the two breakfast bills confused. There was House Bill 16 that changes some of the things that a local board has to look at and consults with the school community council on whether or not a school is serving breakfast and why, but that's just breakfast generally. So every school, whether or not they have a certain percentage of their students on free and reduced lunch, the LEA would need to look at in consultation with the school community councils of those schools why they're not serving breakfast. So you could have an elementary school that has 10% on free and reduced lunch. They would not be part of the Start Smart program. But House Bill 16 would still require that they have an internal discussion with no reporting to the board. So there might be a little confusion around which bill we're talking about. To answer the question about what are we getting a waiver from, it would be the requirement outlined in House Bill 222, which requires a certain percentage of lunch or higher have to serve. It's a shall serve the alternative breakfast model. The bill is clear, though, that it does not prevent them from serving their traditional school breakfast already, which Amanda would have to correct me, but I think we have a very large percentage of our schools already serving a traditional breakfast. which is before school starts. So this would just be making sure that the food continues to be available after school started. And the bill does not require, and we're not seeking in the waiver, any specific model as to whether it's grab and go or if it's in the cafeteria or the classroom. That's completely up to each school on how they want to handle that. So that's what they would be seeking a waiver from, is the requirement to do an alternative breakfast model as cited in that new part of law that's created in House Bill 222. I'll move the screen away so I make sure that I have the rule in front of me. In terms of financial and logistical hardship, so the goal that we have with this rule, and the reason why we have LEAs coming back every year for the specific schools, because we want to make sure that we're problem solving with the schools. This is not meant to be punitive in any nature. It's meant to highlight what is the issue, what are the roadblocks, and look at whether or not our staff in child nutrition program has the ability or resources to help them through their roadblocks to make this available. And if not, maybe they need a waiver for a year, and then we continue to work with them to make sure that we can figure out the best way to bring forth the requirements that are laid out in House Bill 222. Not sure if I'm forgetting any of the other things, or if you have, I'll stop there and
yeah. Let's check in, Jenny.
Okay, so I suppose you're saying that the community council element that is in one of the other bills that was passed is irrelevant to this?
It is. Mm-hmm.
So that would be in another rule somewhere? It is
it's not in a rule, it's actually in code. So there's a requirement for school breakfast programs generally. So we should probably differentiate between school breakfast programs and the Start Smart Utah program. The school breakfast programs is a bigger category, and then a subset of it is a Start Smart program. So these schools that have higher populations of students on free and reduced lunch are going to have new requirements on how they serve breakfast. Whereas all schools look at whether or not they even serve breakfast is House Bill 16. And there's no requirement in House Bill 16. They have a conversation with the school community and look at why a school might not be. But that's not related to this Start Smart program. They go in tandem, absolutely, but they're not necessarily impacting one another based on the way that the code is written. And there's no existing rule out House Bill 16.
Okay, so, and I guess this is just relevant to our time frame, right? I mean, we're talking about an urgency to get this in for something that we may not even be doing in a normal way in the fall. So I'm just curious how many schools actually fall within each of these three categories outlined here. Is there an understanding of, or how many are doing this? I mean, how big of is this already happening, or very few doing it? And this is going to be a major change for a lot of our districts on top of the changes that are already taking place. Does that make sense?
Sure. And I can ask Amanda for the specific numbers on the 70, 50, and 30. We did pull those in the session, but the State Superintendents Association and the local or the Utah School Boards Association both came out in support of the bill and the requirements within the bill, knowing that if there were issues they needed to work through in ramping up and meeting those requirements, that the waiver would help them do that. And that was the reason the waiver was put in, was to buy the schools time that need a little more time based on the timeline that's laid out in the bill to get themselves up and running with the requirements that are laid out. But in terms of, I do know for the requirement to just serve breakfast, if you participate in the National School Lunch Program, out of the 1,100 schools we have, over 900 of them participate in the National School Lunch Program, and 95 of those 900 and some change do not serve breakfast. So the other 800 or so do also serve breakfast on top of school lunch. So there is already a lot of schools serving breakfast. What's really changing is it's not just being available in the hours before school starts. They're extending that window so that it's available after the bell has rung and can be consumed regular school hours in some
Right.
form, whatever they choose.
I just wondered how many schools are doing that right now. I'm just wondering how much of a big change is this for schools? Because it does take a structure element and a teacher. You've got to either train or provide information for teachers so that they can make it work within their classroom, right? I mean, there's a methodology model for this. So that's what I'm wondering. How many will be impacted by this or need to be, change their model?
And Amanda, I see your mic.
Yeah.
I might toss it to you.
Yeah, is that okay? Sorry, I was just trying to pull up my spreadsheet and look real fast. So for next year, for the 70% and higher, it'll be 88 schools that can do that. And also, just want to point out that it doesn't necessarily have to be breakfast in the classroom. It can be grab and go breakfast, like afterwards, or like up in Weber District this year. All of their high schools, they did they opened up their cafeteria and allowed kids to eat breakfast during their special group sessions. So they have like a half hour where kids can either go and be with their teachers or just sit and be around the school. And so they opened it up during that time too. So it's all different models and ways, and everybody can do it. But yeah, so for the first year is the 88 schools. And then the second year, 50 and above would be 365. And then I'm sorry, I don't have that 30% pulled up on our model because we didn't have that during legislative sessions. The legislators added that at the end. So I don't have that number. But so for year one, it would be 88. And for year two, it'd be 365 as of now.
Okay, so that's half of our schools that are doing the breakfast then, right? I mean, just on those two, that's not based on the third one. And although the 50% does give them an additional year, so they can see it coming.
Right.
Kind of
Yes.
the idea.
Correct. That is the idea. Yes. And so that everybody has time, to get this going and to make it successful.
Jenny, does that help?
Sure. Let me look back through my notes again real quick. So if someone else has a question.
I'm going to pause for just a minute. And if we have time, we're going to go back to this action item. But I know that we have number 11, which is time sensitive. So if it's okay with the committee, we're going to hold this and we are going to move to action item number 11 so we can make sure that one gets passed. And then we will come back and do whatever we can with the time we have left. Is that okay with everyone? I'm going to assume that's a yes.
And Chair,
I'm so sorry we had to cut Jeff.
if it helps, Rule 912 is not time sensitive. We have 2 years for that rule, so we can hold on a month for that.
Okay, great. So I know we need to do number 11, which is the parental exclusion form. So we're going to pause. Thanks everyone for staying on hold. And then we are going to just quickly jump to action item number 11, which is the 2020-2021 parental exclusion form from the state assessment. And you guys will notice if you looked at it, it was divided, but I think Darren and Jared are here to talk to us about that, maybe just briefly going over what the changes are, and then we will need a motion for this.
Hello.
Hello, welcome back.
Hopefully you can see me. All right, yeah. All right, I'll go through it. So this is the parental exclusion form that we use it as in Utah Code 53G 6803. There's a maintain and publish a list of state assessments, so on. This is fulfilling that requirement. So the organization of it is, you'll notice elementary is the first page, elementary assessments, K6, and then you have secondary state assessments, and then the last 2 pages are brief descriptions of what those assessments are. To go through the additions, if that's all right. So on the elementary page, as was shared earlier in the meeting, we have the early mathematics assessment and then the related alternate assessment that goes with early mathematics. That's an addition. And then also with the new Dynamic Learning Maps contract, or DLM, that's the alternate assessment. We now have science included there instead of UA. Thank you for pulling that up. And then if we'll go to the secondary, just talking about additions, you'll see one addition there, just the Dynamic Learning Maps science included. And then these are all reflected in the descriptions on the last 2 pages. Okay, if you could scroll back up to elementary, we'll go through the really a couple of the high level deletions. So the RISE interim writing, the reason that's removed is it doesn't exist. We've removed that and just had writing within the benchmarks, you'll notice there. So that's not even an assessment given. And then we'll skip Access 2.0 just for a moment. And if you could scroll down to the secondary state assessment page. You'll notice RISE interim writing there removed, and also Acadience reading. So we administer Acadience reading, but it's elementary level, so it doesn't need to be included on this secondary page. Okay, so let's talk about well, any questions for that first? Maybe.
Committee members, quickly, do you have any questions? Okay, continue, Jared.
Thank you. So you'll notice on both pages, we have the Access 2.0 for English language learners, and then the alternate version for students that need that. So this is really our kind of our big ask. We're desiring to remove this assessment. Now I guess we're some background on the assessment. So this is information that an EL student will take, and the information that's provided is proficiency levels around a student's English language learning within the domains of speaking, listening, reading, and writing. And so we're aware, so this is where we're grappling a bit with. So we're aware that this fits under the code, that this is a state assessment, it's on a state platform. And so we understand that, you know, it qualifies to be on this document. However, from discussions with Christelle Estrada in our Title III section with EL learners and, excuse me, with EL students, we have some, I guess, concerns that we're seeing in the field, and also with the work that we're doing at USDE as your staff. And so I'd like to just go through some of those concerns, if that's okay. And so the first part, to help us with this, I've included within the Civic Clerk the one, it's a fact sheet from, yeah, there it is, EL Student Civil Rights Fact Sheet. And this may give you some more detail. We won't, as you can see, it's from Department of Justice and Department of Ed, just as reference. So the first part I just wanted to start off with from USDE perspective. So, and I think Christelle's on the call here, but she mentioned that during the October 2019 board meeting, so this past fall, there were some motions that were approved by the board from the English Learner Task Force. There were 4 findings and then recommendations. And I have actually, I'm sorry, I didn't provide those here. If we want to go through them, I did send them to Jeffrey that he could maybe display. And Christelle could share more insight. But to fulfill those recommendations, the data from the WIDA Access 2.0 assessment is pretty essential and critical. And so if students are then able to opt out that missing data makes it difficult to adequately address those recommendations from the board. In addition, the state education agency is required based on federal law to administer those. Thank you. So there's the motions presented with the findings. So then from an LEA or school level, schools are required to monitor a student's English language proficiency in reading, writing, speaking, and listening. So whether the student takes the test or not, schools are still required to monitor that student's progress towards English proficiency. So again, this makes it quite difficult if a student is opted out of that test to be able to continue to monitor it, and puts some difficulty towards the schools to make that happen. It also, I guess, from a school's perspective, they need to be able to teach the Utah core standards, provide these students access to these standards, which are in English. And so without this knowledge of where the student's at and being able to monitor and provide instruction, not only in English, but then also in the core standards, that becomes quite difficult. In addition with that, with it being on the form, we're concerned that it may be misunderstood by districts or schools that this is something that they don't necessarily need to administer and they're not required to. And then I guess the final point with parental rights. So we understand parental rights and that need, and that they determine their child's education. To be honest, with it being on the form or off the form, a parent can determine that. And so one concern is that the parents of EL students may not understand English very well themselves. And so how to truly communicate what the opt-out entails if you don't allow your student to take this particular assessment is very difficult if they just have an English form and they mark all the boxes and submit that. It makes it difficult for the school to truly share with the parent what some consequences are either way, the pros and cons. And I'll stop there.
Thank you for that information and background. I think Board Member Hanson has a question.
Thank you. I wondered on these access tests and on the, if we look at the secondary state assessments page, so we've included some language on the high school civics exam and on the CTE skill certification that says, hey, if you opt out here, it's going to have a greater effect on it's going to affect more than just the child not taking the test. I wonder if first we could add something like that to the access test to say, hey, this may affect your child's receiving proper services or something like that. But then I wonder if we can emphasize those things a little bit more, maybe up in the intro part, those paragraphs above, to say that some of these tests may affect your child's education or ability to graduate or ability to get a job. We talked about the CTE test and how maybe that the effects of not taking the test weren't being understood well by the students and the parents. I think the same point with the others. Is there something we can do on the form? The other suggestion or question I have is there a way to make the access tests so they don't qualify as tests that need to be opted out of? Is there something in the definitions that we can play with there to change the category of testing that they fit into if the putting up some language there is not sufficient? Those are my questions.
Thank you, Scott. Jerry, did you want to respond to that? I mean, for me, I think the issue, the civil rights violation, those kind of issues are probably most predominant for me when it comes to the access for English language learners. But Jared, did you want to respond?
Sure. So definitely open to including information on the opt-out form, though it's getting pretty packed on the secondary, but we can make it work. Which may help. Hopefully, parents are reading the form and looking for that information. As far as the within the code, this particular assessment is, I mean, it fits pretty much every point as far as federal mandated, state mandated, and then requires the use of a state assessment system. So I'm not sure, and would welcome. As I mentioned, we have Christelle or Darren who may be able to provide other guidance or thoughts since it's with EL students' particular concern.
Before we have somebody else jump in, I just want to tell committee we're going to be allowed maybe about 8 more minutes before we are cut off. So just keep that in mind, please. And I want to see what Board Member Earl's question is. And then if we need to open it up to other staff, we can.
I just have a quick question. How many students are actually opting out, or parents are opting their kids out of this particular assessment? What are we looking at? In the reality, if no one's doing it or we're only having 1 or 2, this may be a non-issue. What are we really looking at?
Thank you. Can someone speak to that?
Yeah, I can speak to that. So right now, we're not collecting the participation data, though we're estimating that it somewhere under what our RISE assessment is, which is about 3.5%. But we don't have the hard data at the moment.
Okay, thank you. Jenny, did you want to follow up with that?
So I guess the only question is, because I don't think most parents opt out of these particular assessments because they anyways, from my understanding, it's because they don't want the data collected on a more intrusive level. That's one element to it. There's other elements to it too, but that's the primary one. So it just is, I'm just wondering if there's a misunderstanding somewhere. Then, a school often, if someone will mark something and they think they might have not understood, they'll contact. So it just seems like a low percent, or we're not even really sure, but it's not a very high percent. It seems like we could do this in another way. So.
Right. And I think we also keep in mind that a parent can always, whether it's on a form or not, can always opt a child out. So.
Yeah, but they may not have knowledge of it.
Exactly. Yes.
So, yeah.
Any other comments or questions? Since there are no other comments or questions, I'm going to make a motion that we recommend that the board approve the 2020-2021 version of the parental exclusion form from state assessment form. And is there any discussion to that motion?
And that's with removing these, right? With the
how it is
learners.
The way it is now, with the ones crossed out and red crossed out, just exactly how it is.
Yeah, I would not be for that. So.
Okay, any other discussion to that motion? Well, then let's go ahead and take a vote. And if we need to make a new motion, we will. I just wanted to get a motion out there on the table. So Vice Chair Marsh.
Aye.
Board Member Cannon.
Aye.
Board Member Earl.
No.
Board Member Hanson.
No.
Motion carries with 2 noes, Earl and Hanson. I am an aye. So with that, I think we are going to be cut off now. Staff or anyone, we will hopefully be able to revisit. Hopefully we'll have a meeting in July and can revisit the Start Smart Utah and the 912 law enforcement related one, and then also talk about the standard revision process. But thank you all, everyone, for your great input and discussion. And I'm sorry to rush us at the end. But, I will see you soon. Thank you.
Thanks,
We have
Jenny.
June too. Oh my gosh, we have June. I'm just skipping all. So I'll see you guys then.
Thank you, Jenny. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.